Hello and welcome back to Bicycle Legs and another edition of In Defense of. And can you please welcome for the first time to my channel, Mr. Tom Curless from Curlesmania. Tom, pleasure to have you on the channel.
Very happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
And today we're going to be talking about Led Zeppelin's, well, it's their last proper studio album, isn't it? And that is In Through the Outdoor. Now, we'll go into the packaging in a little bit, but just so you know, this album was the release date's a little contentious on this one, I discovered last night. Um, According to Wikipedia, and they source the RIAA as a source, and this is what I mentioned when I did my anniversary album show this month. This album was originally released on the 22nd of August 1979, but if you go onto Discogs and look at the releases there, it will tell you that it was the 15th of August. So I'm not sure which one's quite correct. I generally go with Wikipedia because, as I say, they're sourced. So this was another hit album for Led Zeppelin. It, got to number one in the US, number one in the UK, got to number three here in Australia. Six times platinum in the US, so 6 million copies sold. It's platinum in the UK and double platinum here in Australia. Tom, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how you first got into this particular Led Zeppelin album, sort of when it was. Was it an early album for you, or was it one you got into later? Or
It was an early album for me. It has a lot of sentimental value as well because I have a very clear memory that my best friend at the time gifted this to me for my 10th birthday in 1979. It was so excited because he knew that Led Zeppelin was like my band. He knew that I loved Led Zeppelin, and it had just come out, and that was sort of the first time that I I was so excited because I just bought a new Led Zeppelin album that just came out. So I just thought, wow, this is so great because I was catching up with all the other stuff. I had older sisters who had a lot of the records, and their boyfriends had all the album, and they would make tapes for me, like Houses of Holy and things like that. But this was the first time that I actually bought a Led Zeppelin record, or it was gifted to me, like I said. So I was so excited, and I just wore the grooves out. I think I have my original copy is somewhere, but it's anyway. I have a little thing that those old things that used to put I had my name on it with a sticker, those things you used to punch to put your Tom Curless on it, and I made sure that it was on there.
oh yeah, the Dymo, I think it was called. Or yeah,
Yes. Yes. So it's on there. I gotta find I don't know why I don't have it handy, but I don't. But anyway, but yes, I wore the grooves out, and it has a lot of value for me in a sentimental way because it was one of my early records and I still love it to death. So
yeah.
that's my experience with it. Hmm.
No, I love that story because I remember when I came over to your channel and we did the Split Ends show, I mentioned that Corroboree or Waiata was one of the two albums I got gifted for my 10th birthday. So I love there's a little bit of a synchronicity going on there.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, that's great. It's
So
incredible.
now this album, this Led Zeppelin album, it's not as well looked upon by a lot of the fans and the critics, I think. And that's why we're discussing it in as an in defense of, because Tom and I both really, really like this album. I would personally venture to say that this is definitely in the top half of Led Zeppelin's catalogue for my personal taste.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that this is like the only Led Zeppelin album really where John Paul Jones is very much taking the lead musically, whereas Jimmy Page is sort of taken a step back, as it were. Would you agree with
Hmm.
that?
Absolutely, I would agree with that. I think that Jimmy was struggling at the time. I think he was struggling with heroin addiction apparently. And John Bonham was also struggling with alcohol. So from what I understand, John Paul Jones and Robert would always get to the studio first. And they would be waiting for Jimmy and John, who would not show up until much later. And so finally they said, well, we're not just going to sit around and do nothing. Let's start doing something. We're at the studio. And so John Paul Jones would usually take the lead, and he always talks about his new toy, which was the Yamaha synthesizer that he had just gotten, and he was very besotted with. And that's how they kind of started writing a lot of things on this new toy that he had, this new synthesizer.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
Hmm.
it's because of that sort of synth sound that some of this has, and we'll go into that when we get into the album. I think that's a lot of the reason why this album doesn't get so sort of critically put up there as some of those other Led Zeppelin albums, and why a lot of the hard rock Zepp fans don't really dig this album so much.
Right, right.
But let's talk a little bit about the packaging, because this is one of Hypnosis's most elaborate album covers, I think. And I'll put some pictures up on the screen as we go along and we talk about this. Firstly of all, of course, there's the outer bag. So I believe that had something to do with their manager, Peter Grant, basically saying something along the lines of, we could put this album out in a brown paper bag and people would still buy it, sort of thing.
I think that's absolutely right. I think what happened was they were doing this fancy sleeve, and it was the costs were going up and up and up. And finally, Peter Grant said, "We could just put it in a bag and put stamp Zeppelin on it; it would sell." Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So
yeah,
it reminds me a little bit of the black plastic wrapping that the original copies of Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd had.
exactly.
And of
Yes.
course that's a Hypnosis cover as well. Then of course we have the actual sleeve, and there are six different variants of this,
Mhm.
shot from six different angles of the sort of the protagonist lurching over the bar, sort of thing, sort of looking into his drink, looking very, I don't know, pensive. He's deep in thought, isn't he?
Yes. Yes. And it looks like he's doing something like I remember at first I was like, what is he doing? He's sitting at the bar and he seems like he's very intent on doing something. And then you dig deeper and you realize it's a Dear John letter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And talking about the expense and the extravagance that Hypnosis went to, they didn't just go into a bar and take these photographs. They built a whole set purely for this album cover shoot. So
And absolutely. And it was made to look out like a specific bar in New Orleans,
yeah.
apparently. Yeah.
And then you get the inner sleeve, and the inner sleeve is sort of black and white. It's graphic, drawn, sort of, things that are on the bar. You've got your ashtray and your sort of mats for your beer mats for your beers and all that sort of thing. And it's black and white. But then if you daubed it with a moist rag or something like that, then like invisible ink would come up and color the picture for you. So I think that's incredible too. Just little sort of Easter eggs in the packaging, as it were.
Yes. I think I had read somewhere that Jimmy Page's daughter had a book that you could do that with. You could make it color. It was black and white, and you could make it color with water or something like that. So he said, "Can we do that with the inner sleeve?"
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I mean,
So.
it's a really great packaging. It's one of my favorite Led Zepp covers too. I know Martin Popov's really into the cover for Presents and the object on that, which is also a Hypnosis sleeve too. But I really, really like this one because it's just so detailed, um, and I feel like it fits the music pretty well too.
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I used to wonder what is this? Like, why is this wind coming through like I never knew understood what this was, but then I realized maybe it had something to do with the inner sleeve as well, that you could that maybe somebody had done the water on the front
Yeah,
cover as well.
I
Yeah.
feel like it's sort of like indicative of the bartender sort of wiping the bar, cleaning
Oh,
up
okay.
after the drinks and that sort of thing. So that's just
Yeah.
my take on it.
Yeah. No, it's such a great package. I couldn't agree with you more. And I realized that when you open the inner sleeve, you realize that maybe that's what our protagonist is looking at.
Mm,
When all the stuff on the bar. I thought that was great.
yeah.
Yeah.
So let's have a look at the album and go through it track by track and just sort of give you guys an idea of why we really like this album. And it starts off with the song In the Evening. Now, most of the songs on here, unless I sort of note, are written by John Paul Jones, Jimmy Page, and Robert Plant. And this is no exception to that. So, what are your thoughts, Tom, on the opening track in the evening?
Wow, I love it. I think it's a great beginning. I think there's this sort of spooky beginning when you put the needle down and you don't really know what's happening. You hear this sort of, I think Jimmy's bowing the guitar a little bit. And you hear some like timpani or something going on and it has like an effect on it. And it's just a great, what an atmospheric beginning to the song. And then, suddenly Robert comes in with the, in the evening, and then bam, the whole band comes in. And I just think, and that what a great groove as always. They just have these great grooves. And I have what are my notes? Look, it says Jimmy's playing Stratocaster with a whammy bar, which is very different for him. I don't think this might be the first time he's ever played on. Maybe I don't. Maybe it was Presence was the first time, but it was not a usual guitar for him. But he's doing that whole he's really doing that, using the whammy bar in a big way. And it's a different sound, and I say it's a very cool opener for the record. So that's my first take
Yeah.
on it.
I had exactly the same thing in my notes about the opening. That was the exact word I used too, was spooky. But I
Hmm.
love that about sort of that intro to the song. To me, this song has that sort of mid-period Zeppelin feel. It wouldn't have sounded out of place on Presence, except maybe for the synthesizers, because of course, on Presence, there were no keyboards at all. And
Right, right.
so this is quite a left turn from Presence in that
Hmm.
respect. But it is one of the simpler songs on the album. I think Jimmy plays a really cool solo on this song. Um, there's a really cool sort of, moody instrumental middle section, which is great. I think it's a good opener for the album. It's a slightly got a foot in the more traditional Led Zeppelin sound, but also a foot in the sound that they would establish for the rest of this album.
Hmm. Yes, I forgot you're right. I forgot about the middle part, which I love too. How it kind of comes down in the middle and kind of has that back in again. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So then we,
what is the beginning of I'm sorry, the beginning of the solo, you were mentioning the solo. He sounds like he's hitting something or something's, it sounds like something drops on the floors. I don't know what's happening at the beginning of the
yeah,
solo.
I'm not
That tick,
sure.
tick, tick, tick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not sure what that is, but yeah. So then we get
Fascinating.
Southbound Suarez, which is the first of two songs that are just credited to John Paul Jones and Robert Plant. And they're quite different songs, the two sort of Jones and Plant um, originals. What are your thoughts on this one?
Um, I enjoy it quite a bit. This is really I can't remember, like you were saying, the last time that a song started with piano like that. I mean, there are some piano keyboard things in the Zeppelin catalog, of course, but just this sort of that, and it's basically a 50s style rocker in the vein of Candy Store Rocks somewhat. Um, sounds like they would it sounds like a warm-up song that maybe this because they I'd heard when they got back together it'd been a while and they kind of warmed up a little bit on these sort of 50s-esque rockers. And this kind of sounds like something that maybe they were warming up a little bit with and they turned into a song. Um but I think it's a great upbeat song, and I think Robert sings. I think his vocals are great on this. So I really think it's a great second slot song. Enjoy it.
Yeah, I know it definitely has that sort of. There's a couple of songs on this album, as we'll go through it, that have that kind of 50s feel to it, which again is not something they hadn't done before. As you mentioned, there are sort of earlier songs that have that kind of 50s feel to it as well. Um, as I say, this song and a song we'll talk about on side two are the only two that are just credited to Jones and Plant, and they're very, very different from each other. Um, I think John Bonham's drums sound great on this song and indeed on the whole album. I think Martin Popov is on record as saying that John Bonham's drums sound, particularly great on this album. And Jimmy still gets, even though he's not credited as a writer on this song, he still gets a little bit of room to let rip with the guitar. Um, Again, I think we find on side one here, the songs are more sort of with a foot in the traditional Led Zeppelin sound, whereas side two, we'll find that they really are sort of going into something quite different. Um, so yeah, I mean it's a really good song. So I really like it, but I think I like the next song even better, which is Fool in the Rain. Um, so what are your thoughts on Fool in the Rain?
Yeah, I love absolutely love it. Same feeling. It's funny that you mentioned John Bonham's and the drums and the drum sound. I mean, this song, I have my notes have "what a groove" in caps with exclamation points. Just unbelievable. It's like John Bonham's take on the Purdy Shuffle. And he just executes it perfectly. I mean, it is just you can't get a drum machine to do this. It just has the space between the notes is where the magic is, and John Bonham has it in spades. And this song, like you said, I mean, it's kind of interesting because Jimmy, like you mentioned earlier, Jimmy kind of took a backseat a little bit on this record, but his playing is incredible. I mean, it's almost like he didn't write as much, but he kind of came late to the party, but then said, I'm going to play my butt off, which he kind of does. And John Bonham does the same thing. And this song is just, I can't get enough of that riff or that the riff and the drums. I mean, the riff goes perfectly with the drums as well. And there's something on YouTube where you can hear John Bonham's isolated track on this, and it's just mind blowing. It's incredible, and you hear him grunting and yelling, and it's interesting, very very interesting to listen to, but it's just incredible. And I also love the calypso, crazy calypso middle section. I mean, what that just like where did that come from? That's just like not anything Zeppelin had ever touched before, and it's actually executed pretty well. And So I said a strange tone. My last note on this was strange tone on the guitar for Jimmy the solo. That I don't know. It sounds like he's got this. I don't know what effect he has on the guitar, but it's something very different for them.
Yeah.
So I really love Fool in the Rain. Love it to death.
Yeah. I don't know if it was the same over in the States or in North America, but here in Australia, this is actually one of the two songs. I mean, the other one, obviously, All My Love, which we'll talk about when we get on to side two. But this was the other one that got played on the radio a fair bit. I don't know if that was the same in North America, was it?
Um, it did get some play, but I maybe, I remember hearing it on the radio, but it wasn't like a big song on the radio at the time.
Yeah. I mean, as we go through this album, it is, as I mentioned earlier, very different from Presence. Presence was a very straight ahead album. There's no keyboards on it. Whereas this album definitely plays with different genres and that sort of thing. Um, you mentioned the Calypso middle section. You know, you said Zeppelin have not done anything like that before. I mean, they'd never done calypso before, but it wasn't their sort of first foray into sort of world music, as it were. I think
That's
of,
true.
sort of their reggae with, Jamaica and things like that. So,
Yes.
they did like to sort of dip their foot into the Caribbean sounds, as it were. But
Yes.
yeah, I mean, it's a great song, and that dun 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 dun. It's just
Oh,
a great piano riff,
great
and
riff.
you talk about John Bonham sort of doing the Purdy Shuffle. He does do it, but it's definitely still got that John Bonham sound to it. It's got that, you know, there's that oomph that I think, you know, the Purdy Shuffle is usually very light. It's very, sinuous and slinky, whereas I
Yeah.
don't think John Bonham can quite do slinky and sinuous and that sort of thing. He's much more, and that's not a criticism of him, it's just his style.
No,
He was a very heavy-handed drummer. He was, hard-hitting drummer.
couldn't
And
help it. Yeah.
so he does this wonderful shuffle, but it's still got that real John Bonham oomph to it, which I really, really love. So
Yes, absolutely. It's like the Purdy Shuffle on steroids.
yeah. And then side one closes out with Hot Dog, which is the only song on the album which is credited solely to Page and Plant. So, which is unusual because every other album's sort of dominated by Page Plant compositions. Um, so yeah, how do you feel this one sort of closes out side one?
Well, this one's interesting. I mean, it's kind of a, rockabilly sort of throwdown. And I maybe it was the Page Plant thing because, I can almost picture the Jimmy having that riff of, diddle-diddle-diddle-diddle-diddle-diddle-diddle, and then them kind of figuring it out, make it into a song. Um, and it's fun. I mean, it's a lot of fun. You can tell Robert loves this type of stuff. You can tell he's very excited about singing. He's doing the whole willa willa willa, he's doing the Elvis kind of thing a little bit and talking about a girl in Texas. And it's just kind of a silly, fun song. But it is enjoyable. I mean, I enjoy it when I listen to it, and it's played very well and it's very tight. Um, and Jimmy does a great job. Jimmy does a great job as well with the riff. And it just sounds like they're having a lot of fun. So that's kind of the way I see this song.
Yeah. Yeah, I do like sort of Robert Plant almost going into his Elvis impersonation, on some of the vocals on this song. And it does have that sort of almost sort of honky tonk kind of feel to it, doesn't it? With that riff that you were talking about. And and again, that sort of 50s rock and roll thing going to it as well.
Yes. Mhm.
Um, Look, I'm going to disagree with you only on one thing. The song is fun, but it's the only song on the album that to me sounds a little throwaway. It sounds like something they tossed off in a day in the studio sort of thing.
Yes.
Not to say it's
Yes.
not fun, and I'm glad they didn't make a whole album of that because I don't think I would have enjoyed that very much. But as a sort of a diversion on this album, it's fun.
Mhm.
But yeah.
Well, this is one of those where I agree. I do agree with you to a point where when you listen to Coda and you hear the three songs that were not on the record, that's when you say,
Mm.
wow, well, this one made it and the other, that one didn't.
Yeah, I wonder if that was to appease Jimmy Page a little bit though.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. I didn't think about that. Great point. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So,
So that's side one of the record. And then we get on to side two. And I think, Tom, you'll agree with me that side two has a quite different feel from side one. Um,
absolutely.
they
Yeah.
really feel to me like they're going into sort of an art rock kind of sound on side two. And it
Yes.
starts off with the wonderful sort of 10-minute mini epic. Um, I never quite know how to pronounce this either. Is it like Carousalumbra or, you know?
I used to always say Carousel. I'm not sure if that's right
Hmm.
either.
So how do you feel about this one?
Oh my. I can't say enough about it. I absolutely love it. Um, I was listening to this on just preparing for this episode, and I never get tired of this song. I've heard it so many times and I never get sick of it. It's like, as you said, it's a 10-minute epic, almost like I said in my notes, almost like a synth version of Achilles' Last Stand, but not quite. I mean, um, but it's, it's got, I kind of mapped out the parts. It's got like five parts to it. Um, and it's just and it flows just so wonderfully. It just flows well, and it keeps changing, but you don't notice it because it's so well put together. Um, and they have that one for part one. I say is like the song part where he does the and then then there's the instrumentals with the stabbing keys runs um, and then there's a Jimmy. I have a Jimmy guitar intro into breakdown with it when he starts saying, where is your word? Where was your, and then so kind of breaks down. Then it comes back, picks back up again with a funky groove. This is like part four. I have where he says, touched by the time they come in that whole funky part.
Hmm.
It almost sounds a little bit like something off of Physical Graffiti or something. Um, and then at the end, they do the power chords within the groove, the down 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 down. And then it ends with Robert doing some great vocal things, and I just I love it. I think that I've heard that the lyrics, because the lyrics are sort of interesting. If you look at, I actually looked up the lyrics, and what I understood, what I had read about was that he said that a lot of these lyrics had to do with Robert's problems that he was having the prior years, and also his disappointment with, like for example, Jimmy Page did not come to the funeral of his son, and he
Mm,
apparently that hurt him a lot. He thought, wait, I thought we were really great friends, and John Bonham came, but you didn't come. And so there's a little bit of interesting lyrics in here about being disappointed with somebody, and I think that has to do with Jimmy, but this is just reading into it.
yeah,
Um, but so the lyrics are very interesting as well. And so yeah, I absolutely love Carouselambra. I think that's how you say it. Love it to
yeah.
death.
Well, I'm going to go on record and say this is my favorite song on the album. It's definitely a top 10 Led Zeppelin song for me, possibly even top five. That's how much I love it. I really love Led Zeppelin when they're being adventurous and getting beyond that sort of hard rock, blues rock uh, sound that they were known for in the early days. It's a 10-minute song. I counted three parts, but I could see how it could be five as well. But yeah,
I'm
it
being
is one of,
generous.
yeah. It has John Paul Jones playing that Yamaha GX1 synth, and this is the one song on the album where it really has that GX1 sound to it. I
Yes, it
always think
does. Yes.
when I think of GX1, I always think of Keith Emerson on Works Volumes 1 and 2, and particularly Fanfare for the Common Man and
Yes.
Pirates. It has that
Yeah,
very
Pirates. Yes.
yeah, and of course Stevie Wonder was using this synth in the sort of mid to late 70s as well. Secret
Mhm.
Life of Plants and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
the first section still rocks. It has, Bonham's drums are really thunderous on it, which I really, really love. The second part is sort of half tempo and more atmospheric. Um, I like what you were saying about the lyrics too, about, the potentially sort of the idea of being let down or maybe even betrayed, by someone close to you, that sort of
Yes.
thing. I didn't really know that story about Jimmy Page, and that's a shocker, really.
Mhm.
Um, and I think the third section almost sort of um, presages what you would get in the early 80s with some of the synth pop bands, the English synth pop bands. You think of those sort of early Ultravox and things like that. And I can
Mhm.
hear a bit of that in it. Which I can understand why, hardcore hard rock Led Zeppelin fans may not like that so much, but I think it's brilliant. Um, you know, so
Same
yeah,
here.
it's my favorite song on the album because it goes through so many different styles in that 10 minutes.
Does. It
So
does.
then we get the big, big radio hit, All My Love, which is the other song written just by John Paul Jones and Robert Plant. Um, Again, this is I feel like the song that people will point to and say, this is why I don't like this album. But
Mhm.
I'm interested to see what your thoughts are on this song.
Yeah, I agree with you that people do point to this song as sort of like the schlocky kind of almost to the point of like, wow, this is Led Zeppelin. And I think I had read that when they were mixing this down, Jimmy and John kind of looked at each other and said, the next album's going to be heavier. Apparently during the playback of this song. But it's hard not to love this song. Like you said, it's much different from the other song that's credited to Jones and Plant. Um, but I mean, when you know that it's a song for the death of his son Karek. I mean, it's hard not to feel emotions when you listen to it. It's a poetic, I have in my notes, it's a poetic way for Robert to talk about and how to deal with the death of a child and move forward. It's a very touching song and a great vocal from Robert, in my opinion, very heartfelt. Another synth, as we talked about, synth-driven song. Um, but yeah, as I said earlier, this was the song that people would point to, as you pointed out, that would say this is too soft for Led Zeppelin. Um,
Yeah.
it almost feels like the precursor to the Honey Drippers or something, um, I think I do the acoustic solo from Jimmy. Oh, just love that. I think it's so appropriate for the song, and it's so well done. And the just I just think it's a great song. It's yes, it's slow And yes, it's kind of a borders on ballad for Led Zeppelin, but I love it. I think it's very well done.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like this points a little bit of the way to where Robert would go with the song in his solo career, like Big Log,
Yeah.
you know,
Hmm. Yeah.
which is, I loved, that was really, I sort of am a little younger than you, a couple of years younger. And, the first exposure I really got to Robert Plant was Big Log, because that was a big hit
Right.
here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love that song to death. And but this one would get played on the radio a lot. It wasn't a single because Led Zeppelin just didn't release singles, generally speaking. They were kind of very. I don't think they ever released a single in the UK.
Hmm. No, they
So
never did. Yeah.
um, I think I've got a single that they did release here of "Whole Lot of Love" or something like that. But yeah, I mean, you know. You can still tell that's John Bonham playing drums on this song. It's not like he
Yeah.
was suddenly going soft and all that sort of thing.
Right.
Um, if they'd released this as a single, it would have been a hit because it got played on the radio all over the place. Um, and I think Jimmy plays some really, it's restrained guitar, but it's very tasteful, I think, those sort of
Absolutely.
tone pedal bits that he's doing throughout this song. I really like them. Is it my
Hmm.
favorite song on the album? No, but I really like this song, I think. And again, if they'd made a whole album of All My Loves, I could really understand why people wouldn't like that. But that's definitely not what this album is. This is very much a one-off on the album. And I think as a one-off on the album, it works very well.
Right. Absolutely. I agree. I wouldn't want to hear the whole album like this, but I think it's a great. And apparently, I forgot to mention that apparently Robert said to John Paul Jones, "Let's do something really simple." So I
Mm,
thought it was interesting that that was the first comment made when they went into this song.
yeah.
So, and like you said, it's kind of like Big Log is really simple too, but it works. It's very effective,
Mm.
you know?
And then the album closes out with "I'm Gonna Crawl," which, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting way to end an album, I must say. It's not necessarily how you would expect a Led Zeppelin album to end, but I think it works quite well. What are your thoughts?
Well, we may disagree. This is the one song that I don't love a lot. I don't, when it comes on, I always kind of go, like I don't know quite what they're going for. It seems like it's almost because the slow blues thing kind of works like T for One worked really well on Presence, I thought. And then this feels more like a synth driven slow blues or something to that effect. And maybe it's not a blues, maybe they're going for like a soul thing. I'm not quite sure, but um I in my notes I have not my favorite song, the weakest on the record in my opinion. Robert tries hard to bring it to life, but still doesn't quite work for me because at the end he's really doing a lot of vocal gymnastics to try to get things happening.
Hmm.
Um, and then I said T for One is much more successful, but this is just my opinion. So
Yep. No, that's fair enough. I like the orchestral sort of synth opening, and then it goes into a sort of 6/8 50s rock and roll feel. I may have mentioned this on the channel before, but I'm rather a sucker for a 6/8 feel.
mhm,
I really like that sort of, it gives a song a sort of a momentum, you know.
mhm.
But and you were talking about Honey Drippers with All My Love. I feel like this, kind of presage Honey Drippers, Um,
Yeah.
it was making me think of Sea of Love and things like that. So I think Robert Plant sings up a storm on this song. Those every little bit sections get really intense. Um,
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
it's an odd way to finish an album, but I quite like it. So it's not I think my least favorite song is Hot Dog. It's funny that they have what we would probably agree are two of the weaker songs closing out side one and side two.
Yes. Yes. Very interesting.
But
Yeah.
mind you, I don't know how I would resequence this album. I don't know if you really could. But I don't know. In the end, where would you sort of rank this in the Led Zeppelin catalog?
I would put it, let's see. I would probably put it it would be in the middle, I think, because I as I've gotten older, I was doing a show on Led Zeppelin and on another channel, and we were talking about the weakest part of Led Zeppelin, and I said something about how when I was younger, I really loved one and two, the really heavy riff stuff, and then as I got older, I gravitated more towards the second half of the catalog. And that's kind of happened to me. And so I would say that, I mean, I love physical graffitis, physical graffiti, and I really love presence. I like presence a lot as well. But I would say that, and maybe it would be like third or fourth, something like that.
Yeah.
I'm not something. It would be up there. It'd be the top half.
Yeah. Well, I agree.
Hmm.
I'm definitely more a second half of the catalog kind of guy with Zeppelin as well. I mean, the one and two have their charm, but and this might sound, and please forgive me, anybody who thinks what I'm saying here is complete heresy. But uh, those first couple of albums, they're fun, but they're very derivative. I mean, they cop so many uh suits for plagiarism and that sort of thing on those first couple of albums because they were just nicking old blues songs left, right, and center and that sort of thing. But they were discovering a sound while they were
Right.
doing that. And I think later on in the second half of the catalog, they discovered what to do with that sort of hard rock sound that they developed by copying all those blues licks in the early part of the catalog and how to make it their
Yes.
own and how to go beyond it as well. And that's why I really, really like this album. I probably, I definitely like Physical Graffiti better. I'm a House of the Holy guy. I really like that album a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I would probably put this third or fourth as well.
Yeah.
What I will say, and I think Tom, you'll agree with me on this album is not the stinker that a lot of Led Zeppelin fans think it is.
No, no, and I don't understand it when people put it really low on their list. I mean, I guess I understand because if you like the heavy riff, if you like the really heavy Zeppelin, you're not gonna love this album as much. I get
Mm,
that, but I still think it's very, like you said, you mentioned the adventurous,
yeah.
they were trying something different. I think they felt like 1980 is coming. Punk just hit. They weren't affected by punk as much. I think they were affected by the spirit of it. And I think they were thinking, well, we can't just keep repeating ourselves. We have to keep evolving. And I really think they made a big effort to evolve in a certain direction on this record. I think they succeeded in a lot of it.
Absolutely. I was just going to say that they are adventurous on this album, but most of their adventures on this album succeed, and I think succeed admirably.
Hmm.
So it would have been interesting to see where they went from here because, yeah, maybe they would have made a heavier album next, but I don't think they would have left this behind altogether. I think
Hmm.
that spirit of adventure would still have been there, and it would have been interesting to see what they would have come up with if we hadn't lost Bonzo in that sort of tragic circumstance that we did.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a quick question for you before I forget, and that
Yeah,
is,
sure.
yeah, because whenever I talk about this record with people, we always bring up the extra tracks on Coda. So because there's this debate about what if you had your way and you were the producer of this album and you could make the call, would you substitute any of the songs on Coda? Was it Ozone Baby, Darlene, and I think it's Wearing and Tearing, I think, are from those sessions.
Yeah.
Would you substitute anything?
Um, Maybe I'd substitute Ozone Baby for Hot Dog. I don't know, but
Yeah, yeah,
other than
yeah,
that, um, I mean, Coda's a funny album, isn't it? Because it's a real hodgepodge of a thing. But um,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, they're three really good songs. But I mean, other than Hot Dog, I don't know if there's anything I'd really want to sub out of this album. So
Okay. Well, that's fair enough. No, I just figured I'd ask because it always comes up whenever I talk to fans about, or
yeah,
Zeppelin people about. It's always like, oh, I can't believe they left Wearing and Tearing off. That would have made the album so much better. I'm
yeah.
not sure about that. I'm not sure.
Hmm.
So
So there you have it, everyone. Those are our thoughts on In Through the Outdoor by Led Zeppelin. Please let us know in the comments what your thoughts are. Are you with us thinking that this is an underrated album in the Led Zeppelin catalog? Or do you agree with sort of the majority of the critics and the fans who think this one's not great? Would really love to know. Tom, thank you so much for doing the show with me. I really, really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun having you on the channel.
thank you for
If
having
you
me.
Yeah. If you're
Mhm.
not already subscribed to Curlesmania, please go and fix that right now. He does wonderful shows there, particularly his series of album battles, which I've been had the pleasure of doing one of on Split Ends. I will leave a link to Tom's channel in the description, so please go there and give him a sub and tell him Bicycle Legs sent you. Please do like, share, and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. I have everything playlisted, so if you want to look at some of my other In Defense Of videos, I have a playlist for those. If you want to see some of my studio albums ranked shows, I have a playlist for those. And if you want to see some of my appearances on other people's channels, like Curlesmania, I also have a playlist for those. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at bicyclelegs on Instagram, Twitter, and a bunch of other places. I also have a dedicated Bicycle Legs Facebook page. Links are all in the doobly-doo. Please do come and give those all a follow and join in the conversation. I'd really love to have you there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.